take a detailed tour of this house where the architects explain the layout planning, materials used, and highlight the most important and interesting features of the design. You can also download the PDF ebook. All of this on buildofy.com.
So we came to Aalloa for the first time in 2006-07, and I think we were just completely taken by the site, by the overall landscape. The river flows towards the south, and it's got a bit of a rocky edge, and from where you have the landscape sort of rising always upwards. That's because during the monsoons, the river becomes a catchment and there's all this water which is sort of flowing down. And this situation sort of makes the overall riverine landscape. And the site is actually a part of this kind of an overall situation. If this is Sabarmati, you have the first lip which continues, you get a second one like that, and then you have a sudden and a very dramatic sort of a rise in the landscape, and you get a plateau which is approximately 15 meters. So the clients wanted to use this lowermost part right next to the water as a kind of a farm, and then the first sort of raised level is where they have a sag plantation. We thought we could capitalize on the overall landscape and its majesty by sort of really building on top of the mound over here, and from where you can get very interesting views from across the river to the other side and so on. So we decided to put the building on the rear end, the edge which is further away from the river, so as to leave most of the mound free for activity or spending the evenings and early mornings and so on. From the highest mound, there is another mound right next to it, and between them they form this kind of a valley where all the water sort of ultimately flows down to the river. And the other two important building masses, which is the swimming pool and the tower, were located on the other mound across the valley. So the pool is actually cut into the side of the valley like that, and then you have a tower which is a little further up, something like that. The idea was to engage three-dimensionally with this very interesting part of the site and the overall riverine landscape, and also they sort of, in some sense, they engage different coordinate axes. Clients actually are based out of Ahmedabad. So initially they wanted the house to be much bigger than what it eventually became, and they also wanted it to be right next to the river's edge. We told them you should build a little further away from the river, so that it sort of becomes something that you also look out to. And the other thing was to not build a lot. Eventually, we started discussing with them, and the brief then sort of became 3 sleeping spaces. And then there's of course this hall-like space where you can eat, sit around, so the living core of the house. There's a kitchen and there's some services. The most exciting part of the site is really this intersection of both the mounds and the valley that happens between them. The house sits on the western edge of the mound. The river is towards the east. So once the main choices of how to site the principal built masses was made, we started exploring ways we could really put a building on top of this mound. The soil is very treacherous, and you have a very old neem tree at one edge, and this is the other mound, and there's a valley in between. We actually thought of having a 2 brick thick retaining wall which sort of goes around at the edge of the mound, and what it does, it stabilizes the soil at the edge of the mound. And once you do that, we introduce a set of columns, 10 very thin RCC columns, to create this kind of a pillared hall, which is then sort of made into the stabilized platform which is made by the retaining brick wall. You get thick walls and room-like dark spaces towards the west, and you get this pillared hall towards the east. And into these thick walled room-like spaces. You start putting services like toilets, like the kitchen, the store room, another toilet for the master bedroom, and sit outs and a part of the dining table and all of that. Whereas the hall-like space towards the east is left predominantly free. There is loose furniture there, and this gives us a very interesting contrasting set of conditions. So what happens is that you have a set of hills towards the west, so these small openings into the thick brick wall, exposed brick wall, sort of let you have a sense of that, and you have very large openings towards the east, so you get very nice breeze flowing through the house at all times of the day. So you get dark spaces towards the west, you get a very bright hall like the one we are sitting in right now towards the east. This side is the sunrise and this side would be the sunset. So really the house becomes a frame through which you start really making sense of the entire landscape, the way the sun moves. In section, by contrast, you have the lower earth mound, and then there is a valley, and then there is this kind of the other earth mound, and this is the old neem tree. We realize that no matter what we do, some part of the natural terrain or the site we are going to lose to construction. So the house really in section develops by first cutting into the ground, and you get this kind of a semi-sunken basement. Then you get another principal space of the pillared hall at the level of the mound, and then there is a mezzanine here, which sort of looks into the main space. So you have the house sort of half cut into the ground, placed on the ground, and then hovering on top of the ground. So you have three principal spaces. Each principal space has a sleeping area and a lot of other ancillary services and functions. The idea was to try and have the clients have a great variety of experience of the landscape. And then you have this kind of a sweeping hyperbolic paraboloid roof which goes and sits on top of the three different levels and sort of unifies them. But more importantly, because it's this kind of a curved plane roof, it in a sense notionally gives you back the ground that you had lost during construction. So the memory of how the shape of the ground originally was, in spite of the fact that the house now sits there, is always there. You just have to look up, and then the roof sort of always tells you the story of how the landform was. On the other side of the valley, the pool is kind of cut and placed into the edge of the rock. So in perspective, you would have the pool sort of doing something of that sort. And there's a little kind of a seating area developed on the other edge of the pool. And right behind the pool is where there is the water tower. Water tower has 4 levels. So it has a tank at the highest level. It has changing rooms, and it serves the pool at the lowermost level. And the in-between 2 levels are actually pavilions where you can just go and enjoy looking out at the sky. So this kind of a structure is then further developed and articulated by using materials, by using the way the openings are made, the way doors and windows are made, the way the floor is made, and so on. As much as we've made an effort to shape the house, we in turn have been shaped quite a bit by it.